President Barry Jagdeo urges the developed world to demonstrate the political will to avert climate change at a time when it is needed the most.
The Inter-American Development Bank announces a $15 million loan to help strengthen Guyana's financial sector reform.
And all flood-prone regions except Region 9 have reported some degree of flooding but have assured that drainage and irrigation interventions are working as well as expected.
The details of these and other stories, GENA News and of course the latest sporting action in the Diamond Mineral Water and NCN Sport News after these. Good evening, I am Janelle Prasad.
And I'm Paul Moore.
For this edition of the 6 o'clock news for today, Thursday, December 11, 2008. Paul.
Thanks, Janelle. President Barry Jagdeo has urged the developed world to demonstrate the political will to avert climate change at a time when it is needed the most. In his address at the UN High-Level Climate Change Summit in Poland, he called for a first-order political commitment and strategic decisions from policymakers to combat this crisis. More in this report.
Political representatives from 189 countries have gathered in Poland to identify critical elements for a long-term solution to the fight against climate change. During an address, President Barry Jagdeo cautioned leaders against judging this phenomenon as merely an environmental issue, since it can disrupt socio-economic progress globally. While the president is on a mission to ensure that standing forests are valued in the next climate agreement, he expressed fear that movement to combat the phenomenon is losing momentum. He believes that current actions to stabilize the global economy may divert attention from the bigger crisis that climate change presents. Such inaction could create catastrophic implications and be more expensive to resolve in the long term. As such, countries have been called on to agree to an ambitious target which could see global greenhouse gas emissions cut by 50% by 2050. The Guyanese head of state has also urged leaders to remain vigilant and refrain from opting out of their existing commitments. Mr. Jagdeo believes that if the developed world can contribute $7 trillion to save its banking institutions, it can also shell out the money required to fight climate change. The need for greater emphasis to be placed on creating low-carbon economies through financial incentives has also been highlighted. In light of this, he has urged participants in the RED debate to acknowledge the importance of forest nations and need to substitute deforestation revenues if the fight against climate change is to be won. The Guyanese leader has also emphasized the need to create policies and institutions which are viable and accountable to those who depend on the forests for their livelihood. President Jagdeo also stressed the importance of sensitizing all stakeholders about the implications of climate change if they are to become champions of change. And as leaders continue their debates on Friday, he has urged them to consider all factors since future generations will have to live with the choices made. Reporting for the 6 o'clock news, I'm Shar Dalal.
In the meantime, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has called for renewed global commitments to tackle climate change and the financial crisis. Mr. Ban notes that world leaders cannot afford to allow the economic crisis to hinder progress on climate change, the most defining challenge of the 21st century. As such, he has called for investments in World Green Deal, which could create millions of jobs and spur growth in countries affected by the financial crisis. The UN boss wants participants to assure the world that they are ready to implement the finance structures required to shift the global economy onto a low-emission pathway. He believes that critical elements to long-term action will also have to be sketched out to ensure that the next round in Copenhagen is successful. The Inter-American Development Bank has announced a $15 million loan to help strengthen Guyana's financial sector. IDB supports efforts to improve the regulatory framework, expand access to financial services, and fight money laundering. Edward Lane reports.
The Inter-American Development Bank will support Guyana's reforms to strengthen its financial sector and expand access to credit to foster economic growth. Backed by a series of $5 million US IDB loans, the reform program is expected to help enhance Guyana's macroeconomic performance and financial stability in light of the current global financial crisis. The reforms will improve the Bank of Guyana's supervisory capacities by modernizing the financial sector regulatory framework, which will be updated in accordance with international best practices. The program, which is in line with the National Competitiveness Strategy, will promote the development of new financial instruments and the elimination of barriers to access to credit for businesses and individuals. As part of the program, government is also strengthening the legislation against money laundering and terrorism financing. The Ministry of Finance is increasing its financial intelligence unit's capabilities to detect suspicious transactions and to prosecute financial crimes. The first loan was approved yesterday by the bank and included $2.5 million from its ordinary capital with a 30-year payback period and an adjustable interest rate. The second part of the loan will be $2.5 million from its fund for special operations with a 40-year repay period at 0.25% interest rate. Edward Lane, the 6 o'clock news.
CARICOM Secretary General Dr. Edwin Carrington says the region must enhance its competitiveness in order to benefit from the Economic Partnership Agreement with the EU. Dr. Carrington made this statement while he updated the media on the region's economic situation, among other issues, at his end-of-year media briefing today. Here's that story.
The CARICOM Secretary General today hosted the media to an end-of-year press conference at the Secretariat in Turkine. The regional media were updated on several issues, including the region's economic situation. And on that note, Dr. Carrington stated that the recently signed Economic Partnership Agreement with the European Union should be seen as a vital contributor and competitor to the region's production. He believes that the region needs to enhance its competitiveness to take advantage of the opportunities that the agreement brings with it.
The main way in which we can gain advantage of these agreements and at the same time avoid any negative is to enhance our competitiveness so that we can compete not only in the markets of those countries but in our own market. And this whole issue of competitiveness, productivity increase is one that I am hoping to see is societal sea change and debate and action, or else many good things can do harm.
The Secretary General also spoke of the economy component of the CSME, and to that effect, journalists were updated on the Caribbean Development Fund, which is said to be up and running. CARICOM Economic Advisor Dr. Maurice Odle says no country has yet tapped into the resources of that fund, but there are several requests which will be examined. But apart from this, draft agreements for the CARICOM Investment Code and the CARICOM Financial Services have been presented to regional heads for their consideration and signature. There were also other advancements in achieving a single economic space.
Work continued with the regional stakeholders on the important issue of fiscal policy harmonization. This is crucial if we are going to have the convergence of our economies in such a way as to eventually arrive at a single economy. Work also continued under the aegis of the Committee of Central Bank Governors, which is one of the three bodies of the community recognized under the treaty. Their work has been with respect to monetary cooperation and integration, another critical pillar in building the single economy.
The global economic situation was also raised, and according to Dr. Carrington, while the region cannot escape its impact, governments must work to minimize it.